Sega's final console was known for some system-pushing 3D games and a whole lot of shooters. So today I give this console a little bit of love. I am the Game Collector and this is Second Opinion Games. And today we look at some Sega Dreamcast shmups.
Second Opinion Games.
Ikaruga is probably the most well-known Dreamcast shooter title. Well, not the most well-known for the Dreamcast. Later, it got a port to the GameCube. Why didn't we know about it so much for the Dreamcast itself? Well, because it was left in Japan. In this game, you have to shift between light and dark to either absorb or dodge the bullets, depending on which ones you're trying to absorb and which ones you're trying to avoid. Sometimes the screen will be filled with bullets and you have to maneuver your way through them. Holy cow, is this game ever difficult? But most of the time, it's set up like a puzzle game. So you have to know when to phase back and forth between the different colors, and this gets extremely difficult. My brain just can't wrap around how many bullets are on screen at any one point in time, and that's why I'm really not so good at this game. So I wonder what other GameCube games first appeared on the Dreamcast. Chaos Field, or also known as that other GameCube game that came out in America. Again, this one was left in Japan on the Dreamcast only, and you have 3 different ships to shoot giant bosses out of the sky while listening to some insane techno music. One ship seems really standard, but you have this sword that sort of wipes away the bullets directly in front of you, and another one looks like a shotgun. But usually my rule here is go after the trashiest looking character, which is usually female, and this one is full of lasers just firing and homing everywhere on your targets, making blowing up everything really easy. There's no actual stages here, more just like a whole bunch of bosses just strung together, and that is plenty alright with me, because you don't really need filler stages in between awesome epic boss fights anyway, and this game certainly proved it. Radigy also came out on the GameCube, but that one was left in Japan, just like this game was left in Japan for the Dreamcast itself, and it feels a lot like Chaos Fields. You have that sword that wipes away bullets, but fills a charge meter, which lets you do a lot of damage by running into some of these bullets that are on the screen and throws them right back at the enemies. The one thing you might notice right up in front, though, is the cel-shaded graphics here, which are done beautifully on the Dreamcast. It sort of makes the game feel timeless if it wasn't so short and easy. Honestly, this one I get bored with before I even start dying. Now, all the ships from the Chaos Fields are here in their full glory, so of course I like using the one with all the lasers firing out of it, and this just feels like a bland shooter, even if the graphics are kind of cool. Castle of Shimagami 2 also got a release here in America on the PlayStation 2, of course. If you picked up the GameCube version in Japan, you got a ceramic cat with the game. But if you picked it up on the Dreamcast, you probably got it first there. And here we have a real bullet hell shooter. Bullets are on the screen at all times here, and that's actually part of the gameplay gimmick to the whole thing. The fact that you actually have to be closer to the bullets in order to strengthen up your overall shot. Now, there are many different characters to choose from, and they all have sub-weapons, which make your character move a little bit slower. But sometimes things get a little too hot and heavy, and then you have to use a bomb to clear the screen of all of the bullets, which essentially will save your keister. If you want to make it anywhere in this game, it's knowing when to use your bombs. Also, your hitbox is only a single pixel wide, so maneuvering in and out of these bullets that are everywhere is a lot easier than what you might think. However, it might mean that you're overly confident and don't use the bombs, which means you're going to lose a lot of lives really quick. Also, it has a storyline that's really cool, but sadly, we can't see any of it because we don't know Japanese. I guess we have to wait to Castle of Shimagami 3 to come out on the Wii to find out how crazy of a storyline this really was. Gunbird 2, the graphics aren't the best. It's definitely not pushing the Dreamcast hardware at all, despite all of the slowdown that is going on the screen. And I am using real hardware to play this game, so my god, why is it just chugging along? It also might look somewhat familiar to PlayStation players because it is the sequel to Mobile Light Force 1 on the PlayStation 1 because of some weird things where they decide to take games and rename them and add bad box art. Here we got Gunbird 2 in all of its full glory, moving really slow. Now there's lots of characters to pick and choose from, but honestly this feels like the most generic shooter of all times. It's still a kind of good one if you can get past that slowdown. Ghostblade, another bullet hell shooter, and the gimmick here is that you can make your shots either wide or more refined down to a single stream and focus in on a target and blow that up. If you blow up that target, well, some of your bullets get erased from the screen and other ones don't, so you really have to focus in on that. Also, you have 3 different ships to choose from, and picking the trashiest looking character this time around is a little bit more difficult than what you might think. The graphics here are certainly much better with a lot less slowdown, even though I think some slowdown might be appreciated here and there just because of how many bullets are on the screen. Of course, I'm playing it on the easiest level of difficulty, and still I'm having a pretty darn rough time. This is definitely one of the cooler shooters on the platform, and you could even pick it up on the Wii U channel for a downloadable HD version, which I strongly recommend. Gigawing, another Capcom arcade classic with a lot of different characters to choose from, each with their own options and bombs, blowing up a whole lot of stuff in a standard shooter. But I'd much rather be playing Gigawing 2, which just takes everything and ramps it up a notch between the sound effects and the overall graphics and aesthetics of the entire game, and also that high score that just keeps on going up. I think they're going for a world's record to see how high of a score and how many zeros you could possibly have. I don't even know if there's names for these numbers. They're just that freaking huge. It's a one darn cool game, and if you manage to get good at it, then you can go down in the record books for having 50 bajillion quadrillion points, or something like that. It's also important to know that most shooters actually just use the D-pad, and Gigawing 1 and 2 are one of the few shooters on this console that actually use the analog stick. However, it doesn't work like a true analog stick in this game, or either one, and because there's a giant dead zone in the middle, that could really mess you up. So just like most of these games, you're better off using the D-pad. Trizeal was also one of those very late Dreamcast games, coming out in 2005, which means in Japan only, because we know in North America the system was long gone. Of course, this game also came out on the PlayStation 2. It doesn't look like much, just your standard shooter, of course, and I am completely okay with that. It kind of has a 1942 feel to the whole game, and it plays just fine. One of the cool gimmicks about it is that you could switch back and forth between the different shots that you actually have. So you could fire your Vulcan cannons, or more spread out version, or maybe even add missiles in there and just continuously switch it up. Laser beams, the whole thing is freaking darn sweet, and I really like playing this one when I feel like playing a standard shooter. Nothing really catches me by surprise here, and that's kind of why I continuously turn to it. Border Down is one of the few horizontal shooters for this system, most of them coming out long after the system actually dead in the homebrew scene, but that's a video for another time. In this game, you fire straight forward, and sometimes you use a giant super laser to cut through your enemy bullets. Also, occasionally enemies will circle around behind you. Luckily, if you tap the fire button, you can launch some missiles that are heat-seeking and blow up those pesky pests that are coming up behind you. Just like if you happen to die in this game, you see another pesky pest coming up behind this girl in what looks to be the most awkward game over screen of all times. Seriously, this made me feel pretty darn uncomfortable, but not nearly as uncomfortable as repeatedly dying while playing this game, because it's also one of the hardest shooters for the system, even if I do really like playing it. Twinkle Star Sprites is the system's cute 'em up, and it's done in one of the most unique ways I think I ever seen. You know when you play Tetris 2-player and clear a bunch of blocks and then send them over to your opponent? Well, take that system and put it into a vertical shooter. The whole idea here isn't to clear a level, it is to destroy your opponent on the other side, and of course you can't shoot them directly. This means that playing multiplayer is a heck of a lot of fun. You also have giant bombs you can drop, and you have a charge shot that you have to use strategically in order to cause the most damage on the other side of the screen. And there's also a whole storyline thing if you're really into that. The whole cute 'em up atmosphere really draws a lot of people away, and I think they're really missing out on what probably is one of the better games for the system. Finally, my last two games for this system, and they happen to be my favorite ones. Under Defeat has some of the best graphics of any shooter of all times. Heck, this game also came out on the PlayStation 3 with just a lot more content added to it. And if you think there's some slowdown here on the Dreamcast, well, that same slowdown is on the PS3. So if the PlayStation 3 couldn't handle this game, you better believe it's straining the Dreamcast out to no measure, with its awesome explosions that happen all the time. Also, I really like how realistic the game feels itself. You're really blowing up ships. Now, I know in real life helicopters don't have infinite machine guns or special options that you could pick up. Now, these options have a cooldown mode, so you actually have to wait, taking your finger off the fire button for a couple of seconds, and then letting it charge up, and then unleashing its devastating attack. Also, while taking your finger off the fire button, you can rotate your ship around just a little bit, meaning that it's not a straightforward shooter, which is some depth that I really like having here. But what I like the best is taking on giant warships with a helicopter. This game is just too cool, even if it happens to be one of the most difficult games for the system, probably because your hitbox sprite is just freaking huge, so it doesn't really work well in a bullet hell shooter. That leads me to Zero Gunner 2. Better graphics, a helicopter that rotates around without having to take your finger off that fire button, which means you're always shooting everything. And you don't just rotate a little bit here, you could rotate all the way around. It's also full screen, so you can see all the action in your face at all times. The hitbox here is smaller, which means you can weave your way in and out of bullets even faster, and there's just a lot more depth. Also, when you take out the realistic ships that are trying to take you out, they then transform into huge mechs that aren't at all realistic and try to take you out extra freaking hard. I'm a lot better at this one than I am at Under Defeat, but does it mean I like it more? I go back and forth on that one a lot, but because I can actually make it much farther in this game, because the level of difficulty can be scaled all the way down to infant or child, it actually gives me a chance. And there's 3 different helicopters for me to enjoy here, which means 3 different ways for me to figure out on how not to blow the heck up. And if you truly love the Dreamcast, then you owe it to yourself to have this one in your collection, being the very best shmup on the system. But of course, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a great time making it, and I really love my Dreamcast. And I want to know what your favorite Dreamcast game is. Did I already talk about today with Zero Gunner 2 or Under Defeat? Or maybe you like one of those 3D platformers for the system. Please leave me a comment in the box down below. And until later, I will see you again, guys.